Thank you so much. So we will attempt to do this standing up. And I'm glad to see not all the men have left the room yet. We need as many men to stay. Just saying, if you see another man go, bringing him back. But anyways, it's a pleasure to be here today talking about a topic that is incredibly close to my heart. It's women's health. And even if I have actually left Theramex a couple of weeks ago to take up a new position back in rare disease, I'm still going to be very vocal about this topic, hence why I have also brought Katja Lundell, who is actually head of policy access and communication from Theramex, to be with me today so that we could still make this speech. So we will attempt to do it together. And throughout this presentation, we have added all the references, just in case you want to read more about this really important topic. We've added them onto the slides, and you can check us as well. But some of these are serious peer-reviewed titles, and some come from more surprising places, like Wired magazine. But this is in order to both represent the facts, but also some of the social discourse on the enormous topic of women's health, why there is a problem, and how we get out of it. And we will try to make you all understand this issue from a historical and scientific data-driven perspective rather than an emotional one. Having said that, I am actually incredibly emotional about what we are talking about today, because it is a disgrace how underfunded and underserved this area is. And I know that for the rest of my life, whether I work in women's health or not, I will do mine to help create a world where we have healthier and more empowered women who can help making the world a better place, and I mean this honestly, for their kids, families, friends, but also for the workplaces. And that's why we're making this talk today, because we cannot have a thriving pharmaceutical industry, and with all that this entails for patients and prescribers and all of us in it, if we don't have thriving women that continue to work in the industry. So if we go to the first slide, and this is going very far back in time, because over the mist of time, there have been some fantastically wrong interpretations of the differences in male and female, both from a physiological as well as a psychological point of view. And you might not know all of this, and I hope you don't, but then you're going to learn something today. Because take the wandering room theory from the ancient Greeks, and that was Plato and Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, I kid you not. They believed that the uterus moving up, down, and sideways within the abdomen was the reason for the physical and temperament differences between men and women. If it moved up, for instance, the womb caused sluggishness, lack of strength, and vertigo. And the woman would be pain in the veins on each side of the head. Should the womb descend, there would be a strong sense of choking, loss of speech and sensibility, and most dramatically, honestly, a very sudden, horrible death. The good news, though, was, according to the Greeks, was that the womb, if treated with nice scents applied to the vagina, it would get the womb back in place. Okay? So vapors and smells today remain a mainstay in female health, stemming from that time of pure misunderstanding. But then by the time we get to the Romans, they were less concerned about wandering wombs, but their belief was rather about the suffocation of the womb by a buildup of menstrual blood, or even worse, the female version of seed that mixed with male sperm. Retained seed would proceed to rot and produce vapors that would corrupt the other organs. So yes, that's how the lovely Romans spoke about the womb and about women's health. Now, by the Georgian and Victorian times, we get into wildly derogatory concept of hysteria as the medical terminology for a plethora of women's issues, where, again, honestly, the treatment was smelling salt. So, skipping forward to just last century, when thalidomide, widely used for morning sickness, first opened the myth that medicines couldn't cross into the placenta or into milk. Now, I could continue for 5 hours about all of this. I promise that we won't. We only have 20 minutes. But as you can hear from these examples, the misunderstandings have been astonishingly, with the result of women lagging behind in health for centuries. Next slide. So So there's also this stereotypical belief that women push and cajole their partners and kids to seek medical treatments rather than focus on themselves. But it's actually not a myth. This is actually very true. And I was therefore still profoundly shocked to be reminded of this in a large Danish study. I'm Danish, by the way. But there was a large Danish study that was published in 2019, which showed women being diagnosed years behind men for common diseases like cancer, heart disease, and blood pressure. So the study of health data from 5.9 million Danes found that across hundreds of diseases, women on average were diagnosed when they were about 4 years older than the age at which the conditions were recognized in men. Now, at the time, the researchers said they didn't know whether the later diagnoses are due to genetics or the environment, possible biases in the healthcare system, or some combination of these reasons. But these results were so profound because 4 years means a lot, that the study was published in Nature in order to bring more awareness around this and hopefully some much needed change. But yet we still don't seem to be learning the lessons. In fact, very recent UK research from King Edward's VII Hospital in the UK found that 1 in 3 women have waited more than 3 years to receive a diagnosis about a women's health condition. And these are defined as endometriosis, heavy menstrual bleeding, fibroids, polycystic ovaries, over and underactive thyroid, ovarian cyst, menopause, fertility issues, female sexual dysfunction, and so many other versions also of cancer. The cause again is thought to be multifaceted, including perhaps backlog from the pandemic, staffing issues to wider economic issues, but also the wrongful normality of not focusing on women's issues as urgent situations. And these delayed diagnoses can mean a severe impact on quality of life, both professionally and personally, not just for the women, but for their families and friends, and obviously for the workplaces that they attend to. Next slide. So in January 2023, the World Economic Forum issued a report titled Women's Health, Rethinking the Cost as an Investment for Societal Gain. In it, they highlight the staggering facts that women make up, and we all know this, 51% of the world's population, but yet only 4% of R&D investment in the pharmaceutical industry is allocated to women-specific health issues. And it's much easier to quote the report as it very succinctly sums up the issue. For too long, women's health has meant reproductive health, and their health needs have not been prioritized, which has resulted in a broad neglect of the conditions that only affect or disproportionately affect women. Because just 4% of all biopharma R&D spending goes towards female-specific conditions, and a good way to quantify this is to say that out of 37 total prescription drugs FDA approved in 2022, only 2 were for female-specific health conditions. And unfortunately, the trend continues.
So if we look into our own industry and what we have done in the last decade or so in order to drive women's health, I'm sure there are many former or maybe current Pfizer employees, but I think probably Viagra is one of the strongest product brands in the whole world of pharmaceuticals. And we all know the legend, we all know the trials. It was tested for hypotension, whereas nurse-reported and patient-reported side effects led to the success of the product. That has really made the company billions and also served a patient pool of tens of millions of men. But a little known fact is that there was a trial as well where Viagra was tested for dysmenorrhea, so period cramps and period pains. And I'm sure everyone in this room knows of a female or having had those conditions themselves knows that this would have really been something groundbreaking. But for some reason, Pfizer never picked up this research. So we don't know if this could have been something quite spectacular for women in terms of period pain. The other very interesting area is looking at male contraception. So the female contraception, the hormonal ones, were launched pretty much a little bit over 50 years ago. And there's been many new innovations within that sector, but we all know that they all come with side effects, and it's still much debated on how much should women tolerate side effects. Whereas we know that women suffer more from the consequences of unwanted pregnancies, the male contraceptive idea has been debated and studied for a number of years. But there are very, very few ongoing studies today. And one of the reasons why it's been put down is because it was seen as the side effect profile for men was so hard that this was not worth continuing to develop. The interesting bit is when you look into the side effects and the prevalence of the side effects, it's exactly the same as for females. It's acne, it's mood swings, it's lowering of libido. But this was seen as for the men is not acceptable. And my personal favorite is testosterone for women. Those of you living in the UK, unless you live under a rock, you've heard that menopause is coming back in public debate like nothing else. It's been discussed in Parliament. We have our first menopause policy from the British government rolled out. So it's very much happening, but we tend to talk about the two sex hormones in HRT, about estrogen and progestogen. But for some reason, we seem to not want to accept the fact that women also have testosterone. And the flagging of testosterone and the depletion does lead to a number of effects for women. But women have been scared of HRT in general, but especially with testosterone, it's something that we feel like we shouldn't really go there. And there is one of the last remaining big health myths in HRT, as with the words of Davina McCall, women do not grow beards or penises if they have testosterone. But what it really does, it does help us control our weight gain, muscle mass, and energy. However, at this very moment, there is not a single product of testosterone indicated for women in Europe. So we're hoping that all of you, when you go back to your offices, if you have hormones, ask whether or not you are developing, or if you have a development program going into seeking for testosterone for women.
So the impact of this deprioritization into research and the resulting imbalance in innovation to treat conditions that only affect or disproportionately affect women has beyond the impact to the emotional fallouts of faltering health for all of us, there is a real economic impact also. So again, returning to the World Economic Forum from 2023, so it's very recent, they presented these facts. An estimated 300 million investment into research focused on women could yield a 13 billion economic return and lead to reduced healthcare costs, better quality of life, and years of productivity returned to the global workforce. And for every $1 spent on improving access to family planning services, society yields $120 in health and economic benefits. Last but not least, societies that prioritize women's health show increased productivity across generations. So it's not just because it's a nice to do, it's definitely a need to do. And yet, you know, it's the deeply personal impact that we need to remind ourselves of, and the stories of the limitations that are placed on women because the healthcare is neglected. So Kantar, one of the biggest market research agencies, recently published research that indicates over 75% of perimenopausal and menopausal women do not feel represented in brand advertising and marketing. And we are not just talking tenor pads and vitamins here. And this is a ridiculous state of affairs, honestly, given that this group of women is hugely influential within families. They are often the ones that hold the purse strings, and they themselves are actually quite affluent, and they also have great careers. A colleague of mine was recently looking for an icon to represent menopause on an internal slide, and this was obviously when I was in Theramex, and we were bemused, but not very amused, to come across very few positive representations. So coming back to the story where we started. The unnamed big company is selling access to these icons for menopause, and you can see them up here on the screen. A time bomb uterus, a female symbol with a clock on a pause on it, a depressed, stressed, or teary icons, And obviously my personal favorite is the left-hand side middle. Honestly, what does that want to say? That welcome to menopause where love drains away? So, we need to get as far away as possible from the ancient view that women is only worth something if they can have babies, and that this is the only benefit that we offer to society. Menopause is a transition into a new life for women where we no longer can have babies, or should have babies perhaps, and therefore nature relieves us of this obligation, and we can now go and fulfill a very different, exciting purpose even. And this is how we need to change the narrative of some of the most prominent women's health issues that we are facing right now. But coming back to those logos, honestly, anyone who's in the room today who is in charge of communication or marketing, can you please change this? We need a much more positive version of what menopause or what some of these health conditions means to us. But again, let's go back to menopause, and I think this is the final slide. What would happen to your business if 40% of your workforce, aged 40 to 55, decided to quit for health reasons? Well-being of Women, which is a charity that saves and changes the lives of women, girls, and babies, estimates that 13 million women in the UK are either perimenopausal or menopausal. That's about a third of the workforce, and that figure will be similar in any of your countries that each one of you represent. And research from the Menopause Hub in Ireland shows that 38% of women in this age group, so between 40 and 55, have thought about doing just that, quitting work due to the symptoms of perimenopause or menopause. And indeed, research from the UK shows that 10% of women actually did this or have significantly altered how they do want to do their work. And these figures are not just important to the individual woman who are forced to make changes because of menopause and inadequate employer support, honestly, but this impacts the workforce too. Because with an estimated, and these are just UK numbers, right? With an estimated 900,000 women yearly going through this stage of life, these changes also materially impact the female leadership pipeline, which we're all very dependent about if we want to have a diverse workforce as well. And coming back to people and culture, I think we all agree that we do need diversity where we work. So we are very quickly out of time here. I know that this was a very different topic to bring to Next Pharma, but I think it's always important to bring it back to the patients that we treat, the areas that we focus on within the pharmaceutical industry, and then to make a plea that we actually have an area here where 400 people at Next Pharma start to communicate about it differently, or come back from Dubrovnik and say, there's perhaps something I can do about the 51% of the world that are currently not focused on from our industry, then we can actually make a change. And it will have an impact for all of you, because either you are a woman, or you're married to one, or you're a friend to one, or you're working with one. So for sure, just making sure that we have more healthier, empowered, not sick women that are proud about every stage they are in life, that will improve everything we do in the world. So I think with those words, thank you so much. 1 minute for questions. Okay, Paul. I know I only said vagina once. I promised you 10 times.
Thank you. I was counting.
I know.
Thank you to both of you. I learnt a lot, so thank you so much for what you've just said. But the harsh truth is that Bayer decided in March to kill its research in women's health. And they cited that other therapy areas were more attractive. So I'm just wondering, and I know you're not at Bayer and you're not going to be at Bayer, but if you were at Bayer, is there a convincing argument that you think that you could give to the board of a company like Bayer beyond the demographic information that you just gave that would convince that there is a commercial, strong, sustained commercial opportunity here? Is it a marketing problem, I'm wondering? Is it ourselves that we have to look at to make this a reality?
I think it's multifaceted, and I said that a couple of times as well. I think you don't have enough passionate people to front it. And I think there's also a piece around, when do you feel comfortable as a woman to champion women? And will you be perceived as this radical feminist if you do so? Which has been my issue for many years. When would I be brave enough and courageous enough to front something like this? Because there will be a certain perception about why you're just talking about women, and why are you singling that out, and are you only here for women? But when you then look at the facts about how underserved that has been, you do need very courageous, both men and women, that actually speak up for it. But I think there's been so much to do around it, and so much misunderstanding, that you don't find the unbiased version of this, which is why it's easier to talk about cancer or pulmonary obstructive disease or something else that you can say, I'm unbiased. And I think that's really a reason for why a lot of people don't speak up about it. The other reason is that if you look at hormone replacement therapy, this is coming back to the ugly truth about our industry, is that we are in it to make money. And when you sell hormones, they cost 2, 3, 4 pounds for a treatment. And if you don't have a local healthcare agenda that supports hormone replacement therapy, for example, you're not going to make a lot of money. But again, coming from Theramex, we were just acquired for $1.4 billion by CVC. No, CVC sold Theramex to Carlyle and PAI. So there is money out there. There are people out there that are starting to see that if you're on this journey early enough, there will be growth. And obviously, Theramex is growing by 30% year on year. So the business is there. But we just need more vocal people that are not afraid to speak up about this, and then more women who are yelling about the issues that we are facing and are not afraid to make a comment that we are consumers and we need to be respected. Okay, great. I will get off stage now because